And Russia versus America, we know, is not a new rivalry. It's a rerun of the 20th century. But this time, there is a big difference. This time, there's a third player. And this third player has no stakes in Europe, no military presence, no strategic influence, not yet. But it's watching the standoff closely. I'm talking about China. What would China do if war breaks out? The past offers some clues. In 2014, when Putin annexed Crimea, China was on the fence. They did not recognize Russia's occupation. At the same time, they blamed the West for creating this crisis. And 2022, this year, could be a repeat of that. China cannot publicly endorse an invasion. They cannot support a war. What they can do is this: A, blame the West for instigating the crisis, and B, help Putin navigate Western sanctions. They've done it before, in 2014, and they will do it again if war breaks out. In fact, Chinese state media is already doing the groundwork for this. Let me show you some headlines. Here's what one of them says: US needs Ukraine crisis to legitimize its military presence in Europe. Here's another one: instigating Ukraine crisis serves US interests. You see the pattern. And this will be China's first step: blame the West. Step number 2 will be undermining Western sanctions. It's something of a Chinese specialty. America's rivals are China's business partners, whether it's Iran, Venezuela, or North Korea. We saw an indication of this at the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics. Vladimir Putin was also in attendance. He signed an important energy deal with Xi Jinping. China will buy oil and gas worth $117 billion from Russia. $117 billion. It's simple logic. If Europe shuts the tap, all of that Russian gas will have to go somewhere, and that somewhere could well be China. And the numbers support this plan. In 2021, China-Russia trade reached $146 billion. That was up almost 36% from 2020. So Xi and Putin are sinking their economy. Even Washington is aware of this plan.
If we see foreign companies, including those in China, doing their best to backfill U.S. export control actions, to evade them, to get around them. I wouldn't want to speculate on what those tools are, but we do have tools that can address that, and that would seek to account for that.
That's a warning for Chinese companies. If you help Russia, we will target you. The problem is, such threats may have worked in 2014. Back then, Chinese companies needed the Western market. Today, the equation has changed. China won't think twice before violating Western sanctions. But what's in it for them? Vladimir Putin is getting a market for his oil. He's getting relief from sanctions. What is Xi Jinping getting? Well, he's getting two things. Number one, a template for invading Taiwan. China is looking for America's weaknesses. How eagerly are they supporting Ukraine? What kind of weapons are they sending? Will US soldiers get involved? These answers will determine China's own plans for Taiwan. If America's response is weak, it will embolden China. Plus, it's a valuable distraction for them. In 2021, all the focus was on Beijing, on their genocide in Xinjiang, on their piracy in the South China Sea, and their attempts to cover up the Wuhan virus origins. But this crisis in Ukraine is a breather for China.
Russia's growing threat stretched from the front lines in Eastern Europe to power grids right here in the United States. The Department of Homeland Security issued a new warning about Moscow having the capability to carry out a range of cyber attacks against important websites and critical infrastructure. So for more on this, let's bring in CBS News cybersecurity analyst Chris Krebs. He's also the former director of the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and he joins us now to talk about this. Chris, it's good to see you. So explain to our viewers just how sophisticated is Russia at conducting these types of cyber attacks? And I guess the more important question, Chris, is how good are we at countering them?
Yeah, so Russia, particularly their security services known as the FSB, the SVR, and in their military operations, the GRU, are very good. Unfortunately, they're in fact some of the best in the business. They've had a lot of practice over the last several years and have really refined a different, a various set of toolkits to infiltrate government agencies, critical infrastructure, and do it in a very quiet, pernicious, long-standing way. And so, yes, they're quite good. In fact, they're one of the best out there. from a defensive perspective here in the US, we've gotten better. I think the real challenge, though, is that we are increasingly, as a society, dependent upon a variety of digital services and products, which gives any adversary, whether it's a criminal organization or a sophisticated state actor, lots of options. It's known as attack surface, and we have a pretty significant attack surface. But I think we have built up over the last few years a resilient infrastructure where any sort of cyber attack doesn't really have a broad national level impact. They would tend to be fairly localized.